In the shadows of betrayal and fire, a queen rose from the ashes. Aslaug, a woman of destiny, whose pain turned into power, and whose silence echoed louder than swords. This is not just her story, but a saga of vengeance, sacrifice, and a crown carved in blood.
The sea was restless, a shifting mass of gray and white beneath a sky swollen with storm. The fjords loomed in the distance, jagged stone teeth rising from the icy waters. The sound of waves colliding with the cliffs carried across the valley like the beat of war drums. On this day, the gods themselves seemed to hold their breath. For across the horizon, a single longship cut through the swell, its dragon-shaped prow snarling at the storm as if daring the sky to break. At the helm stood a woman. She wore a cloak of wolf fur, its heavy folds whipping in the salt-soaked wind. Her eyes were as sharp as steel, her face both fierce and sorrowful, like a queen carved from tragedy. Her name was Aslaug. To some, she was the daughter of warriors, the last ember of a dying bloodline. To others, she was a seeress, a woman of visions who carried with her the whispers of the gods. But to all who saw her step from the ship that morning, she was something else entirely, an omen. The villagers had gathered along the rocky shore, their breath misting in the cold air. They whispered to one another, their voices trembling like the sea. Some claimed she was the child of Sigurd, slayer of the dragon, and Brynhild, the shield maiden of fire. Others said she was nothing more than a wanderer draped in stolen stories. But when her boots struck the stone and her cloak fell across her shoulders like the shadow of a wolf, silence swept across the crowd. Behind her came two figures. The first was Runolf, a warrior carved by war itself. His face bore a jagged scar that split across his brow and down his cheek, his single good eye gleaming with a sharpness that silence sharpened further. He carried no words, only presence, and that was enough. Where Aslaug walked, his shadow followed. The second figure was different. Thin, wiry, his lips curved into the ghost of a smile. He carried no blade but a harp of dark oak slung across his back. His name was never fully spoken. He was simply called the Skald. And though his frame was frail, his weapon was sharper than any steel. For he carried not swords, but words. He spoke them as soon as his feet touched the land. His voice carried like smoke through the air, soft yet insistent, wrapping itself around the villagers like a net. "She is the one," he sang, his fingers plucking a low note from his harp. "The wolf-cloaked queen. She will bear the fire that devours kings. Her sons will break thrones, and her blood will command the seas." The villagers shuddered. In the north, prophecy was not a game. It was a chain, a weapon, a crown invisible yet unbreakable. Words like these could carve destinies sharper than blades, and once spoken, they were nearly impossible to silence. That night, the longhouse blazed with firelight, its roof alive with smoke. Aslaug sat at the center, her eyes calm though every gaze in the hall pressed against her like spears. The elders questioned her, their voices rising with each demand. "From where do you come?" one asked, his voice thin with doubt. "What claim do you bring to us?" said another, leaning forward, the firelight glinting off his silver beard. She did not flinch. Her voice, when it came, was steady, low, like the river hidden beneath the ice. "I am the daughter of warriors. The blood of gods may flow through me, or it may not. You seek to know me as flesh and bone, but I am both truth and story. You may choose to believe either." The Skald's harp thrummed again. His eyes glowed in the firelight as he whispered, "She is marked by the gods. If you doubt her, you doubt prophecy itself." Runolf stood in silence near the fire, his axe leaning against the wall. His gaze shifted from villager to villager, reading their fear, their hope, their hunger. He saw the weight of destiny pressing on their shoulders. And in the shadows of his own mind, something stirred. Was Aslaug truly chosen? Or was she merely caught in a web woven by the Skald's silver tongue? The storm broke before dawn. A cry echoed across the village. A child was found at the gate, lifeless, his cloak drenched in blood, his small hand clutching a ruined stone. The snow around him was stained crimson, the cold air thick with grief. Panic erupted like wildfire. The elders rushed to Aslaug. Is this the sign? Does fate demand blood? Is this the price of your coming? Her heart twisted like a knife, but she did not falter. Her gaze cut through the smoke in sorrow. Fate is cruel, she said softly, but it speaks in shadows. What you see as loss may yet be the birth of fire. The skald seized the moment, his voice rising like a storm. The first blood is spilled. The path has opened. Harold the Ruthless marches from the east, his army of iron at his back. Only she, only the Queen of Wolves, can stand against him. The villagers gasped. Fear curdled into belief. They turned to Aslaug not as stranger, but as savior. But Runolf said nothing, his single eye fixed on the skald. In the flicker of the fire, he caught something in the bard's smile, something cold and deliberate. The words he spoke, were they prophecy or poison? That night, Aslaug sat alone in her chamber, the storm clawing at the walls, the echo of the skald's song lingering in her ears. Her breath trembled as she whispered into the darkness. Am I truly chosen, or am I merely a pawn in a tale someone else has written? The wind screamed no answer. Only the flames whispered, their tongues twisting into shapes she could not name. And though she closed her eyes to silence them, she could not silence the doubt that had begun to grow. When morning came, the village knelt before her. They crowned her not with gold, but with trust, with fear, with faith. She had become their queen, whether born of truth or woven of myth. And so began the tale of Aslaug, the wolf-cloaked woman whose footsteps stirred both devotion and dread. The mountains groaned with the weight of winter, their peaks swallowed by clouds that bled snow into the valleys. The fjord lay silent beneath a sheet of ice, its waters frozen into stillness, as if the world itself awaited something yet unseen. In the village, the air was heavy with the murmur of prophecy. Some spoke of hope, others whispered of doom, and at the center of it all sat Aslaug, the woman draped in wolf fur, the queen chosen by fate or by song. But belief is a fragile thing. It must be tested, hammered like iron in fire, before it can endure. That test came when word arrived of Harold the Ruthless. The messenger stumbled into the longhouse, his cloak torn, his breath ragged. Blood streaked his face, and his eyes carried the hollow look of one who had seen too much. The hall grew still as his words fell like stones into water. Harold marches, he gasped. An army of shields, a sea of spears. Villages burn in his wake. He comes for us. Panic rippled through the crowd. Mothers clutched their children. Old men whispered prayers to Odin. The name of Harold was enough to twist the stomach with fear. He was no ordinary warlord. He was a storm in human flesh, a conqueror whose cruelty was sung across the north. All eyes turned to Aslaug. The skald rose, his harp shimmering in the firelight. His voice slithered through the hall like smoke. The prophecy spoke of this. Did we not hear it? A wolf-cloaked queen would rise against Harold. Her sons will shatter thrones. Her blood will command the seas. This is the moment written by fate. The villagers roared in agreement, desperate to cling to hope. Yet in the shadows, Runolf stood silent, his scarred face carved with doubt. He watched Aslaug closely. He saw the flicker of fear behind her calm eyes, the way her hands gripped the edge of the table as if bracing against an unseen tide. That night, when the fires had dimmed and the hall had emptied, Runolf found her alone. Snow fell thick against the walls, muffling the world outside. He stepped into the glow of the single torch that burned near her chair. "You cannot let them believe blindly," he said, his voice low, heavy as iron. "Prophecy is a blade, and the skald wields it like a sword. But steel alone cannot win battles. When Harold comes, it will not be songs that save us, it will be blood." Aslaug looked up, her eyes reflecting the flame. "And what would you have me do? Deny them hope? Strip them of belief when belief is all that keeps them from despair?" Runolf's single eye burned. I would have you be more than a story. I would have you be a leader. Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him. Yet in the silence that followed, the skald's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, as though carried by the wind itself. They will only follow you if they believe. And belief is born from prophecy. The next day, the first trial arrived. Hunters returned from the forest with a tale of horror. A band of Harold's men had been seen not far from the valley, their banners black with ravens. They had taken captives, villagers from a neighboring settlement. Among them were women, children, and old men. The enemy planned to use them as bait to draw the village out. The council erupted with arguments. Some called for action, others urged caution. All turned once more to Aslaug. She rose slowly, her cloak heavy upon her shoulders. Her voice cut through the noise like the edge of a blade. If Harold wishes to bait us, then we will show him that wolves do not fear snares. We will strike. We will take back our people. The hall thundered with approval. Warriors slammed their shields, chanting her name. But in the corner, Runolf's gaze hardened. He had fought enough battles to know the truth. This was no simple raid. Harold was testing them, measuring their courage, probing for weakness. Still, he followed her into the forest. The night was thick with snow, the trees black against the pale light of the moon. Aslaug rode at the front, her wolf cloak trailing like shadow, her breath misting in the cold. Behind her, the warriors moved with tense silence, blades gleaming, hearts pounding. The skald was there too, his harp replaced by a dagger he barely knew how to hold. Yet his eyes gleamed with the fever of destiny. When they reached the clearing, the sight stole the breath from their lungs. The captives knelt in the snow, bound and trembling, their eyes wide with terror. Around them stood Harold's men, tall, cruel figures in iron helms, their axes catching the moonlight. At their head stood a warrior draped in black furs, his voice a growl as he called out across the snow. Come closer, Wolf Queen. Show me if the gods truly favor you. Aslaug's heart thundered. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to weigh the risk, to wait. But the prophecy echoed in her mind, the skald's words coiling like chains. If she faltered now, the people would lose faith. And without faith, she was nothing. She raised her hand. Now! The forest erupted. Warriors burst from the shadows, shields clashing, axes biting. The night filled with the sound of steel against steel, of screams swallowed by snow. Aslaug fought like a storm, her blade flashing, her cloak a blur of gray and white. She was no longer just a woman, she was the Wolf Queen of prophecy, the fury of the North given flesh. Runolf fought at her side, his axe cleaving through enemies with brutal precision. But even as he struck, his mind whispered warning. This was too easy, too deliberate. Harold's men fought hard, but not hard enough, and then he saw it. A shadow moving at the edge of the trees. A figure tall and broad, his armor blackened, his face hidden beneath a helm crowned with iron horns. His presence radiated menace, his voice carrying across the snow like thunder. Harold himself had come. Runolf's blood ran cold. He turned to shout a warning, but it was too late. Harold's axe cut through the night, a silver arc of death. The skald, standing too close, screamed as steel bit into his side. Blood sprayed across the snow, dark against the white. Chaos erupted. The warriors faltered, fear cracking their courage. Harold's laugh boomed, cruel and triumphant. Aslaug froze. Her eyes locked on the skald, crumpled in the snow, his harp shattered, his prophecy bleeding into the ice. Her heart twisted. Was this the end of destiny? Or its cruel fulfillment? Runolf seized her arm, dragging her back. Live, he snarled. If you die here, all is lost. Through the storm of steel and blood, they retreated, carrying what survivors they could. The forest swallowed them, the cries of Harold's men echoing behind like wolves chasing prey. When at last they staggered into the village, broken and bloodied, the people rushed to them. But the sight of their wounds, of the missing faces, of the skald carried pale and gasping, It shattered the fragile wall of faith. Voices rose in fear. Doubt spread like fire. Had the prophecy lied? Had the gods abandoned them? Aslaug stood before them, her face pale, her hands trembling. For the first time, she felt the weight of their faith crushing her chest. She had led them to blood and ruin. She was no savior, no wolf queen. But deep inside, a fire flickered. She remembered Runolf's words, "Be more than a story. Be a leader." As she looked into the eyes of her people, she knew the truth. If destiny was to be fulfilled, it would not be because of prophecy alone. It would be because she chose it. And in that moment, as snow fell like ash around her, Aslaug swore silently to the gods. She would not be a pawn. She would not be a song. She would be a queen forged in blood and fire. The days after the battle were carved in silence. Snow drifted endlessly over the valley, covering bloodstains that no fire could erase. The people spoke in whispers, their faith shattered like the skald's broken harp. Some cursed the gods. Others cursed Aslaug. And though no one dared to speak it aloud, a single question haunted every hall and hearth. Had they been deceived? The skald lingered between life and death. His voice, once thunder in the longhouse, was now a rasp, a shadow of song. His prophecies, once believed to be the breath of the Norns themselves, had turned to riddles that cut deeper than blades. Each word he had spoken was now questioned, doubted, dissected. The myth that bound the village together was unraveling thread by thread. Aslaug watched it all from the high seat. Her wolf cloak hung heavy, but she felt no warmth from it now. Her people looked at her differently. No longer with awe, but with suspicion. Some still knelt, others turned away. The crown of prophecy was slipping, and with it, her power. It was Runolf who kept her grounded. The scarred warrior did not care for prophecy, nor for the skald's songs. He cared for survival. And one night, as the winds howled like wolves beyond the walls, he told her the truth. "You have two paths, Aslaug," he said, his voice as rough as the mountains. "One leads you deeper into his lies. The other makes you something greater. You cannot be both myth and queen. You must choose." His words seared her like fire. She lay awake that night, staring into the embers of the dying fire, her heart torn between the chains of prophecy and the freedom of choice. And in the darkness, a realization grew inside her. Perhaps the skald had never been her ally. Perhaps he had always been the master of her chains. The moment of truth came faster than she expected. Harold returned. Not with a raid, but with an army that blotted out the horizon. His banners were black against the snow, his drums echoing like thunder across the mountains. He did not sneak or ambush. He came like a storm, daring anyone to stand in his path. Panic tore through the village. Warriors sharpened blades, women packed what little they could carry, children wept in the shadows. And through it all, the skald raved from his bed, his fevered voice echoing through the hall. "This is it. The moment foretold. The Wolf Queen will rise. Her sons will crush the serpent. Stand. Believe. Believe." But there was no belief left in his words. Only desperation. Aslaug stood in the longhouse, her people gathered before her. The firelight flickered across their faces, twisted by fear. For a moment, she wanted to speak the skald's lies, to repeat his promises, to cling to the comfort of myth. But when she opened her mouth, another voice emerged, her own. "No prophecy will save us," she said, her tone steady, her gaze unflinching. "No song, no riddle, no promise of the gods. Only we can save ourselves. Not because fate wills it. Because we choose it." The hall fell silent. The skald screamed heresy from the shadows, spitting blood, but none turned to him. Their eyes fixed on Aslaug. And in that silence belief returned, not in prophecy, but in her. Runolf placed his axe on the table before her. "Then lead us," he said simply. And so she did. When dawn broke, Harold's army descended like an avalanche. The earth shook beneath the stamp of shields, the air split with war cries. Smoke rose as torches lit the horizon. and standing at the gates of the village was Aslaug, wolf cloak billowing in the wind, her sword gleaming like lightning drawn to steel. The first clash was thunder. Shields smashed. Axes rang. The air filled with the iron scent of blood. Warriors fell, screaming, but the line held. At the center, Aslaug fought like a storm unleashed. Every strike carried fury, every parry the weight of her people's survival. She was no longer the pawn of prophecy. She was the fire of her own making. Runolf carved through foes at her side, his scarred face a mask of grim determination. Together they moved as one, a storm of steel and will. And then Harold came. The warlord towered above the chaos, his black helm crowned with horns, his axe dripping with blood. His laugh rolled over the battlefield like thunder. He pointed his blade at Aslaug. "Wolf Queen," he roared, "let us see if you are flesh or just a story." The battlefield parted as he advanced. Aslaug's heart hammered, but she did not falter. She stepped forward, her sword raised, her cloak whipping in the wind. Their clash was cataclysm. Steel met steel, the shock of each strike echoing through the valley. Harold's strength was monstrous, each blow meant to break, to shatter, to crush. Aslaug countered with speed, with precision, her blade a flash of silver in the storm. Sparks flew, snow churned beneath their boots. Around them, the battle raged, but all eyes turned to the duel at its center. For a moment, Harold drove her to her knees. His axe pressed against her blade, his laughter booming in her face. "You are nothing," he snarled. "A song. A lie." But Aslaug's eyes blazed. "Then I will show you the truth." With a cry that split the air, she twisted, breaking free. Her sword cut across his helm, sparks bursting as steel split iron. Harold staggered, roaring in fury. Again she struck, her blade carving into his side. Blood sprayed into the snow. The warlord faltered, his laugh dying in his throat. The people roared. The line surged forward, emboldened by her fury. Harold's men wavered, their courage breaking as their warlord bled. With one final strike, Aslaug drove her sword into his chest. His cry echoed across the battlefield, then faded into silence as his massive frame toppled into the snow. The storm was broken. Harold's men fled, their banners trampled, their drums silenced. The valley shook with the cries of victory, the people chanting Aslaug's name. But amid the triumph, silence fell in the longhouse. The skald was dead. His final breath had left him in the chaos of battle, his eyes wide with disbelief. His harp lay shattered, his prophecies undone. The man who had chained her with myth was gone. Aslaug stood over him, her face unreadable. For years she had believed his words, lived by his riddles, worn the chains he had forged. But now, as the firelight flickered across his lifeless face, she felt something strange. Not sorrow, not triumph, freedom. She turned to her people. "We are no one's pawns," she said softly. "Not the gods. Not fate's. Not his. We are our own." The hall erupted with cheers, but in her heart, Aslaug felt the weight of truth. History would not remember her as the skald had promised. The songs would twist her, perhaps even erase her. Some would call her a queen, others a seeress. Some would whisper that she was never real at all. But Aslaug knew the truth. She had broken the chains. She had chosen her path. And as snow drifted quietly outside, covering the scars of war, she understood that truth and myth were not enemies, but mirrors. One lived in story, the other in blood. Both would carry her name into eternity. The screen fades to black, the echo of steel and snow lingering in the silence. History remembers. Legends endure. Which was Aslaug? Perhaps both.